Hey y'all, it's me, Kevy. I packed a whole heck of a lot into this short month, finishing 19 books. We got a lot to talk about, so let's get right into it. The first book I finished in February was Stephen King's short story collection, Night Shift. I already have a whole video sharing my thoughts on that, so I'll have it linked up here and in the description. Next up, I finished my buddy read with my Aunt Jan. We read Project Hail Mary. It was so good. Wasn't it so good?
It was so good.
Right? Oh my gosh. Yes, our video talking about Project Hail Mary will be coming out in a few days, so watch out for that. The first of my birthday books that I read this month was My Year of Rest and Relaxation, which was a gift from my cousin Jenny. Thanks, Jenny. My Year of Rest and Relaxation is about this woman who is just so fed up with life that she attempts to spend an entire year asleep. The protagonist in this book is awful. She's all like, oh, my life is so hard. This guy wasn't very nice to me, and I have no drive or ambition. But if I could just sleep the year away, everything will be okay. Good thing I have more money than I know what to do with, or else I couldn't afford to keep up all this self-destructive behavior. Oh, she really sucks. She even hates her best friend. And while her friend is going through some incredibly difficult stuff, our narrator genuinely does not give a shit. She just wishes her friend would go away so she could go back to sleep. You can tell where this book is going from the very beginning. I mean, it's a book set in Manhattan in the year 2000 that's set over an entire year. See, you already know where that's going. But before I talk more about the ending, I gotta do a spoiler warning. Here's your time code. It'll also be in the description. Spoilers in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So this whole book, I was under the impression that she was gonna jump. Her ex-lover worked in the towers. Then her bestie got a job there. She kept talking about jumping out of windows. Like, it really seemed like that was where it was going to go. But then she didn't. She wasn't even in the towers when it happened. She just watched it on TV. I was really disappointed that she didn't die at the end. The entire book, she was such an unlikable character. Oh, I hated her so much. But I was okay with hating her because I thought I had this horrible death to look forward to. But no, she's fine. The twist, though, is that while she's watching the towers fall on TV, she spots her best friend jumping out the window. And you know what she thinks? She looks pretty good.
I look pretty good for a dead bitch.
Bury that. Because the entire book we hear about how her best friend has horrible self-image issues and hates her appearance. So this was like a semi-sweet moment of the protagonist finally taking notice of her friend and giving her friend what she needed to hear, just waiting until the bitch was dead to do so. I don't remember 9/11. Not because I was too young. Most people my age have memories of it. I just have a terrible memory. Like, the only 9/11 memory I have is that 4 years later, a classmate's mother was telling me about something I did that day. And I was like, wow, I don't remember any of that. So yeah, My Year of Rest and Relaxation was a really interesting read. And if you're into miserable, unlikable characters, then definitely pick it up. My next birthday book came from Rachel Fryman, who got me the second book in the Love Stage manga. I read the first book in the series a couple of months ago. It's a yaoi, so a gay romance. It's one of my favorite anime, and I love reading its source material. While the books in the series are almost scene for scene identical, the books also have little bonus chapters at the end, which aren't included in the series. So I'm loving getting to see more into the world of Love Stage. It's so cute. This little boy was filming a TV commercial and developed a crush on his little girl co-star. 10 years later, he still has feelings for her, but then finds out the truth that his co-star was actually a boy in a dress. But even after this revelation and meeting the guy in person, those feelings are still there. Oh, it's so good. Rachel also got me the third book in the Love Stage series. So thank you so much for that. I cannot wait to continue the series. My next birthday book, also from my cousin Jenny, is The Moving Finger by Agatha Christie. As usual, I'll save my thoughts on that for my next Agatha Christie video. Then I read Steve Cavanagh's The Plea, the second book from the Eddie Flynn series. This was a gift from Sam at Paper Knots Books. The Eddie Flynn series is always an incredible fast-paced thrill ride, and The Plea is no exception. In this book, Eddie Flynn gets hired by the FBI to defend a billionaire on trial for murdering his girlfriend. The FBI demand that Flynn gets his client to take a plea bargain in exchange for some information, with the threat that they have something against Flynn's wife. And if the plea bargain doesn't go through, his wife will end up behind bars. Problem is, Eddie Flynn believes his client is innocent, so he has to find a way to save both his client and his wife. Ugh, this series is so good, and there has not been a single dud yet. My last birthday book of the month was Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney, also a gift from Sam at Paper Knots Books. Thanks, Sam. I read this book as a buddy read with Rachel Fryman. Yes, we read a book together. It was so fun. Oh, it was so hard for us to stick to our reading schedule because this book was just so hard to put down. It's about a couple whose marriage is struggling. One could say it's on the rocks. Sorry. So they decide to go on a weekend getaway in the isolated Scottish mountains as a last attempt to recuperate their relationship. But of course, secrets and creepy things are everywhere. I really enjoyed this one, and there were a few twists though that really got me. Oh, I was so shook. Yeah. Excellent thriller. The next book in my wrap-up was actually a gift from the author, Fairywing by DH Torkavian. Fairywing is a fantasy high school romance novel about a transgender witch. I was initially apprehensive about reading a book set in high school. If you saw my video about George/Melissa by Alex Gino, then you know my high school experience was rough, being forced deep back into the closet and getting death threats. So I got nervous going back to a high school setting like this, but I'm so glad I did. It was really good. The language of the novel was just very easy and pleasant and creative, and I love this line. It goes, "Jack was nimble and Jack was quick, and now Jack was dead." So yeah, there's a bit of a mystery element in there too. But yeah, the story of Fairywing is that Drusilla is a transgender witch in high school, and everyone thinks that she's responsible for Jack's death. But then the new kid Michael shows up and decides he genuinely wants to get to know her. I really liked Michael and how good he was to Drusilla. She was very much the angsty teen, and he stuck around anyway and got to know who she was when she wasn't putting up walls. Yeah, I really loved the romance elements in this story. I also realized for myself that I gotta be careful reading trans romance. Like, I really related to Drusilla when she said after her relationship was starting to happen, this is not how it's supposed to go. It oftentimes genuinely feels like people just aren't supposed to be in love with trannies. We're the freaks. The dirty secrets. The idea of someone actually genuinely falling in love with us and treating us well feels as much a fantasy as witches and magical murdering trees. So as much as I loved watching their romance unfold and seeing her become one of the few lucky ones, I also felt deeply jealous and bitter and lonely. So yeah, that's just a feeling I need to be aware of when I read trans romance so that I don't let it get out of hand and fester. Gotta keep it neatly suppressed. Speaking of dirty secrets, fuck Paul. He was the worst. I felt so bad for Drusilla and her experience with Paul because I know exactly what that feels like. Fuck those tranny chaser bitches. Quick side note, tranny chaser is a term coined by trans women to refer to the predatory men who fetishize us. Additional side note, while the word tranny was originally a term of affection created by trans women for trans women, it has since been weaponized and used as a slur against us. A lot of trans people don't like that word, and a lot of us do. I personally use it and like it as a word to describe myself, but I better not catch any of y'all using it. Okay, back to the book. Another thing I really loved about this book is that for the most part, everyone respected Drusilla's name and pronouns. Even the people at school who hated her. This made me so happy. And it also made the few times where people didn't use the right name or pronoun really stand out. I will say that toward the ending, some of the fantasy elements did get a little bit confusing for me. I don't read a whole lot of fantasy, so it may just be that that's not what I'm used to. But even though I was briefly confused, I was still thoroughly entertained. Thank you, Devin, for letting me read your book. If you like fantasy and or queer romance, I definitely recommend picking up Fairywing. Next up, I have another book that was gifted to me by the author. This book is called The Hand That Pulls You Under by James Flynn. The Hand That Pulls You Under is a collection of short stories, tales of absurdity and lunacy. I really love absurdism in my entertainment, so this sounded right up my alley. There were some really creepy stories in this collection. My absolute favorite one was The Lottery Killer, about a man who wrote a crime novel that just wasn't selling. So to drive up publicity, he commits the book's crime in real life. That was some excellent horror. There was another dreary tale about the awkward death of the family cat. While all the stories were strange and twisty, they're not all horror, like The House of Human Pleasures, about an active couple screwing their way through Asia when they hear about the ultimate pleasure house. That one was pretty funny, and there's also some sci-fi stories in there as well. Flynn also included some drawings alongside some of his stories. Those were really good. The one alongside The Lottery Killer was my favorite. Oh, it was just so creepy. So yeah, if you like strange and irreverent short stories, The Hand That Pulls You Under is absolutely a collection to check out. Next up, I read an ARC from NetGalley, The Damage Done by Michael Landweber. I'll be saving my full thoughts on it for my next NetGalley video, but for now I'll say I really loved most of it. But there were a couple of parts that I really hated. I read one standalone short story this month, and that was A Terribly Strange Bed by Wilkie Collins. So far I've only read, listened to 2 of his books, both of which were very long. So I was interested in seeing how his writing would fare in a shorter format. The premise of A Terribly Strange Bed is that a man wins a lot of money at this little casino, and at the end of the night, the casino owners encourage him to spend the night in one of their spare rooms, rather than try to go home alone so late at night. And of course, danger ensues. This was a really good short story. The image of the portrait above the bed missing its hat. Oh, it was so good. Took me a second to figure out what that meant. But once I got it, I got chills. I was so excited to see if it was gonna kill him. Oh, it was so much fun. I read 2 plays this month. The first was Deathtrap by Ira Levin. I read somewhere that this play had one of the most brilliantly conceived murders ever written, so I thought I'd check it out. The play is a thriller and it's super meta. It's about a playwright who hasn't had much success in a while, but an amateur just sent him a draft of his own play, and he thinks it's so good it's worth killing for. At first the story seems so obvious, like you're foreshadowing this and that very heavy-handedly. Then the twist came, and oh boy, I never saw it coming. And then the next twist came, and oh my gosh, and I never saw that one coming. And then we're in the next act, and I have no idea where it could be going. Oh, it was so good. This play sure was thrilling. And like I mentioned before, it was so meta. The idea is that the play that the amateur wrote and sent to the playwright was Deathtrap, the play we're watching. And then after the events of the first act, the playwright's like, that'd make a pretty good play. Let's write it and call it Deathtrap. I have no idea what the second act will be like. Let's find out. So yeah, if you're not a fan of meta, stay away from this. But it is a really fun and twisty story. The second play I read this month was Art by Yasmina Reza. It's about the dissolution of a friendship after one friend can't believe that the other spent $200,000 on a painting that is completely white. You know that type of modern art where the canvas is just painted a solid color? That's essentially what this was. $200,000. And the dude wasn't even like an art collector. As an art nerd, I was really excited to read this play, and it was a lot of fun. Very melodramatic and funny. The one friend who thought that the painting was incredibly stupid, I pictured him as Poirot for some reason. Which made the whole thing even more amusant. This month, I really wanted to read some Audre Lorde, and I decided to pick up the selected works of Audre Lorde because it was edited by Roxane Gay. Y'all know how much I love Roxane Gay, so that was very much the selling point of this collection for me. The collection is a mix of essays and poetry. Of course, it includes her classic, "The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House," and my favorite essay in the collection was "Is Your Hair Still Political?" In that essay, Lorde describes going on a trip to the Caribbean, and the customs agent, another black woman, refuses to let her into the country because she wore her hair in dreadlocks. Yeah, it's fucked up. There was also some excellent poetry in this collection. I was surprised that all of my favorite poems from her were romance ones. It was refreshing to read poetry from a queer perspective, and those just felt like her strongest work to me. In Sewing, I loved the line, "The tips of my fingers are stinging from the rich earth, but more so from the lack of your body." And then, on Night of the Full Moon, she writes, "The curve of your body fits my waiting hand, your flesh warm as sunlight, your lips quick as young birds, between your thighs the sweet, sharp taste of limes. Thus I hold you, frank in my heart's eye, in my skin's knowing, as my fingers conceive your flesh, I feel your stomach curving against me. Before the moon wanes again, we shall come together." Wow, that's just so good. So those were my favorite excerpts from the selected works of Audre Lorde. But for the most part, it didn't really meet my expectations. I was honestly disappointed. As I read the essays, I kept thinking, I wonder what June Jordan would have to say on this subject. And as I read the poems, I thought, I'd love to read some June Jordan poetry right now. So that's exactly what I did. Before I even finished reading Audre Lorde, I picked up The Essential June Jordan. June Jordan is my favorite poet, and like Lorde, is a queer black woman. I've decided I'm going to do an entire video about her, so I won't share too much about this collection just yet. But I will say that this book gave me everything I needed and more. It's incredible, and really affirmed my love for June Jordan. There's a black woman's response to Eminem in the style of Slim Shady. There's a modern interpretation of Shakespeare's sonnets. There's her writing her own sonnets. There's so much scathing political commentary and sharing her good and bad experiences as a bisexual black woman. This is the best collection of poetry I have ever read. After I finished that, I went and picked up Some of Us Did Not Die, a collection of June Jordan's essays. Again, this was just incredible. The breadth and scope of her discussions was just vast. Like, just in the first story in the collection, the titular Some of Us Did Not Die, she's talking about 9/11. But in this conversation, she also talks about hunger and starvation, and how many women across the globe are denied education, and then calls out George W. Bush, saying, as recently as 4 months ago, George W. Bush gave the Taliban $43 million. Why? To cajole Taliban cooperation with our war against drugs. Clearly, a war way more important than a war against maiming and annihilation of Afghan women. Incredible. Phenomenal. Y'all. If June Jordan is an author that you have not read, you need to fix that immediately. In one of the essays in Some of Us Did Not Die, Jordan talks about a poet named Phillis Wheatley, who was the first black woman to ever be published in America way back in 1774. I was really interested to know more about this, so I went and found a copy of her first book, Poems on Various Subjects Religious and Moral. A lot of the poems are about death, being written for people who had recently lost a loved one. One of them, in the death of a young lady 5 years of age, she asks the child's parents, freed from a world of sin and snares and pain, why would you wish your daughter back again? She also has a poem to the Right Honorable William, Earl of Dartmouth, His Majesty's Principal Secretary of State for North America, where she prays that he will stop taking African children from their parents and their homes, ending her request with, may fiery coursers sweep the ethereal plain, and bear thee upwards to that blessed abode, where, like the prophet, thou shalt find thy God. Essentially saying, if you don't stop this shit, you'll have to answer to God himself. Oh, it's so good. So the publishers of this collection felt like a lot of the people who would be reading this book wouldn't believe it was written by an enslaved black woman. So they went out of their way to provide a list of names of white men who would swear to its authenticity. It must have been such a challenge for her to get her work out there, and I'm so glad that she succeeded in that. It's great, and I feel like she's an important historical figure who should be better remembered. After reading essays from Audre Lorde and June Jordan, many of which had been converted from speeches, I began to think of one of my favorite speeches, delivered by Sylvia Rivera in 1973, titled, "Y'all Better Quiet Down." I wondered if this speech was printed in any sort of collection, and I found this, Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, Survival, Revolt, and Queer Antagonist Struggle. This is a collection of interviews, essays, and speeches by Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson. Oh, this was such a wonderful find. I've heard so much about the work of these women, but I don't think I've ever read first-hand accounts from them. Oh, there is so much vital reading in here. Like, for the very first time, I learned the context around Y'all Better Quiet Down. Prior to this event in 1973, Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson ran an organization called STAR, short for Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries. Quick side note, I know transvestite isn't a term much used nowadays, but it was the language that made sense for them. As explained in this collection, they didn't feel like transsexual was the correct label for them. They didn't get all kinds of expensive surgeries done to be unclockable, to be able to survive and blend into the cisgender world. They were broke, lived on the streets, and were unable to pass. This is what they mean when they say transvestite. STAR would advocate for transvestites, many of whom had long arrest records from years of sex work. Because at the time, sure, maybe some transsexuals could find work in an office, like any other woman, but the transvestites, the street queens, there were only two jobs available to them, drag queen or sex work. Sex work has always been an important part of trans history, and advocating for trans people must include advocating for the rights of sex workers. What's the point in getting trans people some rights if they then can't support themselves because their job is still criminalized? But yeah, Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson would advocate for these trans women and even formed Star House, a place where these women could live and wouldn't need to hustle if they didn't want to. Didn't even need to pay rent. These two were doing really good, really important work. Now, up until 1973, the trans community had a great relationship with lesbians, much closer than with gay men. But that all changed when the original TERF, feminist activist Jean O'Leary, decided that these women weren't women enough for her. Sylvia Rivera had been scheduled to speak at the Christopher Street Liberation Day rally for months. But when she tried to get up on that stage, O'Leary and her cronies literally beat her. When she finally fought her way onto the stage, she said, "You all tell me, go and hide my tail between my legs. I will no longer put up with this shit. I have been beaten. I have had my nose broken. I have been thrown in jail. I have lost my job. I've lost my apartment for gay liberation. And y'all treat me this way? What the fuck is wrong with y'all?" She goes on to tell them that while the audience of mostly white gay men are upholding this mentality of, let us get our rights first, then we'll help y'all lowly trannies. She went out on that stage and said, don't forget about the people who got you here today. The trans women on the street and in prison who need your help. Oh, it's amazing. So yeah, this collection is short and sweet, only 60 pages, and I'll have a link to read it for free in the description below. Please give it a read. Finally, we come to the one audiobook I completed this month. Actually, I began listening to The Count of Monte Cristo in late December, but as the audiobook is over 52 hours long, it took me over 2 months to finish it. Wow. Y'all, this book is so good. If you're unfamiliar, The Count of Monte Cristo is about a man named Edmond Dante, who is wrongfully sent to prison by a handful of enemies. What follows is one of the greatest revenge stories ever written. Oh my gosh, y'all, it's so good. If y'all don't know by now, I love a good character death. The more dramatic, the more gruesome and painful, the better. And damn, does this book have some fantastic deaths. I won't even go into any of them for spoilers and such, but shit. There are several that I would just love to read over and over and over. Some common complaints against this book are that it's too long and there's too many characters. I wholeheartedly disagree. I would not omit a word. Every character is important to the grand scheme of the revenge. They say there's too many subplots and tangents, but there really aren't any. Every allegedly tangential tale is inevitably woven back into the main plot. Everything is perfectly woven together. Yes, it's a long book. Yes, it's a slow burn. Yeah, there are a lot of characters, but it is so worth the read or listen. I listened to the LibriVox recording by David Clark, and he did a magnificent job with it. If you're worried about keeping the story straight or remembering who's who, just refer to SparkNotes. You're not in school anymore, honey. It isn't cheating. I would regularly refer back to the SparkNotes summary to make sure that I understood everything. So take your time with this one, and refer to guides if you have to, and just enjoy this incredible journey. Also, The Count of Monte Cristo is Scott's favorite book. So throughout my reading experience, I would message him about it. It was essentially a one-sided buddy read. But no, it was awesome having someone to discuss this book with. Thanks, Scott. So there you have every single book I read in February. This was so much. But I'm glad I made progress in my birthday books and still had time for all of these other reads. Which of these haven't you read yet? Any of them pique your interest? Let me know in the comments below. March is gonna be kinda like January, with tons of events and read-alongs and read-a-thons and buddy reads. It's gonna be a lot. Oh, but I'm so excited to read all the things and let y'all know what I think of them. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if it pleases and sparkles, I'll see you in the next one. Mwah!